Hello everyone, today we are going to be talking about the early season play of the Los Angeles Clippers. If you do go on to enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about the Los Angeles Clippers. The LA Clippers made it to the Western Conference Finals last season, but of course they are now without their star in Kawhi Leonard. Paul George has picked up the slack, playing at a near MVP type level, asserting himself as one of the top players in the league. And the Twitter accounts and the Twitter trolls have definitely quieted on Paul George this season. But ultimately, with Kawhi Leonard out of the lineup, the rest of the team needs to pick up the slack. They did not early on. Reggie Jackson and Eric Bledsoe in game one were good, but after that, definitely took a step back. And some of those guys off on the bench, specifically Bledsoe and to some extent Reggie Jackson as well, have not been good enough, or have not been anywhere near consistent enough for them to be a team that you can be legitimately scared about in the Western Conference. Now, ultimately, they did pull off a 7-game winning streak. They have moved themselves into a good spot in the Western Conference. But today I want to talk about a couple of things. First, Paul George and his resurgence at an MVP level, the defense of the LA Clippers and why that has allowed them to play so well and get on the 7-game winning streak even while they've had some spotty bench play and supporting cast around Paul George, and then a little bit more in depth on some of those depth players and role players on this team. That being said, let's start talking about the brilliance of Paul George this season. Paul George has reasserted himself this year as one of the top 5 players in the league this season. You can't disagree with that. If you do, you're just wrong. Paul George has been playing arguably the best basketball of his career, by far and away the best basketball since his MVP candidacy season with OKC a few years ago. A stat line of 26.5 points per game, over 8 rebounds, and over 5 assists, tied for last year for his highest assist total in his career, and by far and away the highest rebound total he has had in a long time and as well of his career, all while continuing to be fairly efficient, although his three-point efficiency has dropped significantly this year down to 35.7%, which I would expect will climb over time, but ultimately it's just naturally part of having to do so much on the offense, as the lowest three-point shooting season of his last 4 years previous to this was also that MVP type season he had in OKC because he had to do so much. He's also been playing extremely good on the defensive end, being one of the league leaders in steals, being very disruptive on the perimeter, and showing that elite two-way ability that we know he has been, but is now just finally not getting all of the trolls in the NBA Twitter scene to just dump on him and give him crap every time he screws up. Ultimately, he has been the biggest reason that this Clippers team is staying afloat this year while Kawhi Leonard is out. But after that, it's the defense. The defense has been one of, if not the best defense in the NBA. They've been absolutely brilliant on defense. There's no doubt about it. They are currently second in defensive rating behind the Warriors, in front of teams like Denver, Washington, Chicago, which is not necessarily teams you expected to see at the top of defensive rating numbers at this point in time in the season. But this defense has been very good. And when you look at the team and the fact that they have such a good coach who makes such good adjustments in Ty Lue, it makes sense. Paul George, a great defender. Eric Bledsoe, as much as you can penalize him for how he plays on the offensive end and scoring sometimes, he is a solid perimeter defender. Same can be said for Reggie Jackson, Terrence Mann. Nick Batum is a very underrated wing defender. Ivan Zubac can give you some solid paint protection, not necessarily an elite rim protector and block guy, but he can defend bigs and can be a bit of a shot deterrer, and there's no doubt about it. Throw that in along with a side a good coach, and this is a solid Clippers defense that is a big reason in why they are remaining so competitive, while only having one consistent go-to scoring option in Paul George, because there's just been games this year specifically, and they were losing early on, where there was like no one else in double figures other than maybe Luke Kennard, and Paul George just had to do everything. And there's still games where Paul George has to do everything, but at least as of a bit more recently, there's been a few other guys stepping up. Reggie Jackson has been a little bit better, although still fairly inconsistent and inefficient. Over the last couple of weeks, he's now up to about 18 points per game, but he's been struggling to be consistent or efficient, and he needs to increase his productivity. Eric Bledsoe has been terrible on offense. Are we surprised anymore? Not really. Luke Kennard has gotten a lot more consistent minutes this year, and no more coach's decision DNPs, and he has shot the ball really well. Nick Batum has probably been the most consistent and impactful role player for this Clippers team. Great wing defender, can shoot the three, space the floor, lockdown defender, you name it. Extremely efficient this year. 52% from the field, nearly 45% from deep, making 2.5 a game. Great play from Batum. Terrence Mann, of course, is not going to reach the heights consistently of that brilliant game he had in the playoffs last year, but he's been averaging 10 a night, shooting nearly 36% from deep. He's been solid. And then you have a few other bench guys that you'd like to see more from. Of course, Ibaka and Marcus Morris have only played 2 games each so far. So once those guys can get back into the rotation and they can hopefully get healthy and on the court for this team, then their depth is just going to get even better. Justice Winslow is the only guy on the bench I would say who's been a complete negative. I love Winslow, man. I really liked him in college. I was really hoping his game would translate better. It just hasn't. He just hasn't translated, man. He's played in 11 of the 13 games for the Clippers, averaging nearly 10 minutes. Just not doing anything. He's just not. But just too bad to see. This was probably his last go around now, if he doesn't get anything going here with the Clippers. But this depth from the Clippers is what can really unlock them. But it reminds me of a Clippers team pre-Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, when it was Danilo Gallinari and it was SGA. And these guys were doing their thing. They weren't led by some elite player, but nonetheless, they had a very good defense, they worked hard, and they were willing to dog it out on the defensive end every night, and because of that, they were a competitive team. But now they have Paul George to lead them alongside solid defensive players, none of which were really on that Clippers team before. You're talking SGA, Beverly, Gallinari. It was a very different team, but nonetheless, it's a similar mold, and a mold that could have them get enough success to see themselves into the playoffs, and hopefully, for their sake, have Kawhi Leonard back for the postseason, try and make a push for a title. That is my thoughts on the Los Angeles Clippers up to this point in the season. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down on the Clippers in the comment section below so far this season. And if you want to watch another one of my videos, then be sure to click the box on screen. That being said, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.